The B-21 Raider may eventually serve as a mothership for collaborative combat aircraft. Asymmetric lethality is about achieving maximum combat effect with minimum exposure.
On June 11, 2026, the U.S. Air Force flew a B-21 Raider with both a developmental test pilot and an operational test pilot in the cockpit together for the first time in the program's history. Colonel Matt Guasco, commander of Afotech Detachment 5 at Edwards Air Force Base, described the event as unprecedented this early in a modern program, noting that, in the history of modern test, we've never done that so early in a program. The move was deliberately designed to blur the line between developmental testing, which ensures an aircraft flies safely and meets technical specifications, and operational testing, which focuses on combat performance. This combined testing environment eliminates the gap between ensuring a jet simply works and ensuring it is ready for combat. Since the second test jet arrived at Edwards in the summer of 2025, the Raider Combined Test Force had already shifted from basic flight performance evaluations to mission systems and weapons integration. This milestone reflects a broader cultural shift within the Air Force toward what officials describe as a smarter and faster mindset that challenges old acquisition processes and moves the service toward a more agile system for fielding major weapon systems. The B-21 testing program is accelerating far ahead of schedule, with the Air Force planning at least 100 B-21 to replace the aging B-1B Lancer and B-2A Spirit fleets. Some officials and analysts have called for doubling that number, given the bomber's strategic importance in an era of great power competition. The Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCA drone program, meanwhile, aims to field more than 1,000 autonomous combat drones, paired with fighters such as the F-22, F-35, and F-47. The B-21 is also being positioned within this ecosystem, with the CCA program envisioning integration with the bomber as part of a broader family of systems. At the same time, the NGAD fighter program faces cost and technical uncertainty, opening the door for the B-21 to potentially fill air superiority roles through its command of drone swarms. These converging factors make the B-21 evolution from a penetrating strike bomber into a flying command node one of the most consequential developments in modern military aviation. Manned-Unmanned Teaming, or MUM-T, is the emerging doctrine where human crews direct semi-autonomous aircraft to extend operational reach, reduce risk to pilots, and multiply combat effectiveness in contested environments. CCA, the Air Force official term for its loyal wingman drones, are intended to fly alongside crewed fighters for air-to-air combat, electronic warfare, targeting and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions. The Congressional Research Service describes CCA as an enhancement to, not a replacement for, crewed aircraft, with costs projected at roughly 1/3 of a fighter, making them economically attractive for high-attrition scenarios. The B-21 Raider, however, represents a paradigm shift in how these CCA are employed, not merely as wingmen to fighters, but as a coordinated swarm commanded by a stealth bomber from standoff range. This integration of the B-21 with CCA reflects the Air Force's broader vision of a family of systems, where manned bombers serve as the command node for autonomous drones, multiplying combat power while keeping human pilots out of the most dangerous kill zones. This fighter-first orientation is critical to understanding why the B-21 role as a mothership remains a future-oriented capability rather than an immediate operational reality. General Dale White, who oversees the B-21 program, stated that in the case of the Raider, it means we're now that much closer to placing asymmetric lethality into the hands of the warfighter. In military terms, asymmetric lethality refers to the ability to generate disproportionate combat power against an adversary by exploiting technological, tactical, or strategic advantages that the enemy cannot easily counter. For the B-21 and its CCA swarm, this means a single stealth bomber, operating from standoff range, can orchestrate a coordinated attack by multiple autonomous drones, imposing significant costs on the adversary while exposing minimal risk to American pilots. The adversary is forced to expend expensive surface-to-air missiles on relatively inexpensive attritable drones, while the B-21 remains hidden and protected. This cost imposition is the essence of asymmetric lethality, achieving maximum effect with minimum exposure, leveraging technology to create an advantage that the enemy cannot match through sheer numbers or traditional tactics. The B-21 was designed from the outset as part of a family of systems that includes unmanned platforms, according to analysis of Air Force planning by the Mitchell Institute and other defense think tanks. Its combination of stealth, long range, and large internal volume makes it a natural candidate to host the advanced computing and communications equipment needed to manage a drone swarm in contested airspace. Industry descriptions have called it a flying stealth super-sensing supercomputer, a phrase echoed by senior commanders discussing the bomber potential for future integration with autonomous systems. Unlike fighters, which have limited range and endurance, a bomber can loiter at standoff ranges, while expendable CCA push forward into the most dangerous parts of the battle space. That theoretical advantage is why analysts frequently portray the Raider as a future quarterback for autonomous aircraft, capable of orchestrating complex multi-domain operations from a position of relative safety. The connection between the B-21 and CCA programs is not coincidental, because one senior officer now oversees the entire ecosystem. General Dale White serves as the direct reporting portfolio manager for critical major weapon systems, a position that places the B-21, the F-47 sixth-generation fighter, the LGM-35A Sentinel nuclear missile, and the collaborative combat aircraft fleet under his direct oversight. White reports directly to Deputy Secretary of Defense Steve Feinberg, a reporting structure that gives him authority to synchronize schedules and requirements across these interconnected programs. White himself has emphasized that the combined developmental and operational test approach brings asymmetric lethality to the warfighter faster, reflecting the urgency he sees as essential in an era of great power competition. In a June 8, 2026 all-call meeting with the task force team, White stressed the importance of making sure the B-21 program has the correct resources and is not hampered by bureaucratic holdups. The program must move with urgency, he said, without being reckless. "I worry that we don't embrace urgency," White told a member of the B-21 team. "I worry that talk is cheap. I worry about the courage to challenge leaders." Is the B-21 viable as a CCA mothership? The official position of the U.S. Air Force is clear. CCA integration is fighter first. When asked whether B-21 would be able to control CCA, General Stephen L. Davis, who took command of Air Force Global Strike Command on November 4, 2025, stated that, quote, "The Air Force is right now building those to be incorporated into the F-47, primarily in fighter aircraft." That the first step. Davis further noted that while it's certainly possible in the future that they might become part of that family of systems, and that the B-21 would be the more logical partner for CCA integration, once again, we have to deliver that capability that the Air Force does and integrate with fighters. That the first step. His predecessor, General Thomas Bussière, was even more explicit in December 2024, stating that the Air Force would let the fighter force kind of mature that concept with Increment 1, and then we'll be prepared to integrate that into the long-range strike family of systems, probably at a later date. Bussière added, "Right now, we don't actually have that in the plan. This sequencing is deliberate." According to a recent report to Congress, the F-22 Raptor is designated as the threshold platform for CCA integration, with the F-47 planned as the future primary fighter partner. Integration with F-35, F-16, and other platforms remains an emerging consideration. The B-21, in turn, is deliberately sequenced for a later phase. This delay reflects two realities. Increment 1 CCA are optimized for air-to-air missions rather than long-haul bomber escort, and earlier studies found that pairing the B-21 with comparably sized long-range drones was not cost-effective. Yet from a communications and command architecture standpoint, the B-21 is arguably more viable as a mothership than fighters like the F-35. The F-35 relies on Link 16, a tactical data link that is broadcast in the 960-to-1, 215 MHz band with limited data rates, 2.4 to 16 kpbs, and is relatively easy to detect and jam. Its alternative, the Multifunction Advanced Data Link, MADL, is directional and short-range, requiring gateway aircraft like the U-2 to translate between platforms. The B-21, by contrast, was designed from the outset as a node in the Pentagon's Joint All-Domain Command and Control JADC2 network. Its larger airframe provides significantly more power, cooling, and physical space for multi-band antenna arrays and advanced processors. This allows the B-21 to carry Link 16, MADL, and next-generation data links simultaneously, not just one or the other. It could potentially employ directional laser communications, low Earth orbit satellite communications, and AI-driven frequency hopping to maintain resilient connectivity in contested electromagnetic environments. Its extended loiter time also means it can remain outside A2/AD zones while serving as a persistent command relay, unlike fighters that must return to base due to fuel constraints. That said, viability is not immunity. Jamming remains possible. Adversary electronic warfare aircraft like China J-16D could flood the spectrum or target satellite relays. Even with multiple data links, the B-21 would still require a resilient mesh network and mature autonomous command algorithms to coordinate a swarm effectively. General Dale White, who oversees the B-21 program, has emphasized the need for urgency without being reckless, and cautioned that talk is cheap. The Air Force is methodically building toward the B-21 mothership concept, but it is not there yet. If the concept matures as planned, a B-21 mothership offers unique strategic value, particularly against the anti-access and area denial systems fielded by near-peer adversaries such as China. A stealth bomber can penetrate deeper than fighters and remain on station longer, acting as a survivable node in the Joint All-Domain Command and Control network that the Pentagon is building for future conflicts. From that position, it could queue cheaper CCA to conduct intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, suppression of enemy air defenses, or electronic attack missions, forcing adversaries to expend expensive missiles on attritable drones. Workshop analysis has found that fifth-generation fighters often lack the range required for deep mainland missions, making unmanned escorts particularly attractive for the B-21 deep strike role. The goal is not to replace fighters, but to create a layered team where bombers command, fighters sense, and drones execute, multiplying the combat power of each platform while distributing risk across the entire force. The vision of a bomber-controlled drone swarm faces significant technical, doctrinal, and bureaucratic hurdles that could slow its progress. Autonomy remains the long pole in the tent, as a swarm without effective coordination is just a random collection of individual platforms rather than a cohesive fighting force. Bandwidth limitations and jamming in a contested electromagnetic environment could sever the link between mothership and drones at the worst possible moment, leaving the swarm blind and ineffective. There is also the risk of capability creep, loading too many missions onto a program that has so far stayed on budget and schedule, potentially jeopardizing the B-21 core bombing mission. General White himself has voiced concern about maintaining urgency, saying he worries that talk is cheap and that leaders lack the courage to challenge old processes that slow down acquisition. Balancing the imperative for speed against the need for careful development will be essential to realizing the mothership concept without undermining the B-21 primary role as a penetrating strike bomber. The June 2026 dual-pilot flight was not proof that the B-21 is already operating as a drone mothership. It was proof that the Air Force is testing faster and more aggressively to enable that future capability. Today, CCA integration remains fighter-led, with the F-22 first, the F-47 planned as the primary fighter partner, and the B-21 deliberately sequenced for a later phase of integration. The bomber's stealth, range, and computing power make it a compelling future command node, but official plans still describe that role as possible and logical, rather than as an active program of record. Understanding that distinction separates informed analysis from hype, and reflects the deliberate, family of systems strategy the Air Force is actually building for the decades ahead. As General White made clear, the goal is to place asymmetric lethality into the hands of the warfighter with proper urgency, but without recklessness.